Thrawn is a legendary figure among Star Wars fans, praised for his military genius and staunchly effective leadership. The zenith of his career in military command came under the service of Emperor Palpatine and the Galactic Empire. This is the story of the Thrawn Trilogy written by Timothy Zahn, detailing Thrawn's rise to the rank of Grand Admiral and the exploits that follow. Most notably, this series is considered to be the canon story of Thrawn, separate from the EU Legendarium. The Disney canonization of certain elements of the Star Wars story has obviously been a controversial talking point in the past decade or so. I myself will not pass judgment on that issue, and only want to emphasize the trilogy's canonization as it means this story is the one that will most likely find its way to a TV show or movie, rather than the Heir to the Empire series, for example. As a last point, for those of you who have followed the previous videos I've made on Thrawn, you may notice there will be some inconsistencies between the EU stories and this tale of Thrawn. This is because Timothy Zahn tried to write these books in a way that fit with his previous EU stories on Thrawn as best he could. Not all elements of the older books were dubbed canon, and for that reason some characters' backstories were slightly changed when this trilogy was written. Let's dive in. On a remote world in the unexplored areas of the galaxy, Imperial Captain Voss Park is shown a small hut by Colonel Mosh Barris. It seems to be inhabited as Imperial troops fan out around it, among them Cadet Eli Vanto. He is called forth to translate the strange language written on its walls. Barris is then informed that a V-Wing starfighter has crashed, and now lights can be seen through the trees in the distance. At the crash site, however, there is no body, and several weapons are missing. As it is growing late, camp is set up around the hut, with the investigation to continue in the morning. However, an explosion goes off, sending the camp into chaos. They cannot find their mysterious attacker, and suffer 5 casualties that evening from further attacks. Soon, the Imperials discover their comms are being jammed, and without any further leads, Barris issues an order for everyone to pull out. They transport the entire hut back to the ship, where they are lifted back into the strike fast. Park summons Barris and Eli to his office for a debriefing. He shows them to a window, where outside the lights of the hangar are darkened. They wait there for hours, and then see a dark figure slip out of the transport. It is their attacker, who Park had deduced would stow away back to the strike fast. He is quickly surrounded, and is detained without resistance. Eli recognizes him as a Chiss, and learns he is to serve as a translator for his questioning. Park then asks him his name. For a moment the Chiss was silent, his gaze drifting through the hangar bay. Not like a primitive overwhelmed by the size and magnificence of the place, Eli thought, but like another military man sizing up his enemy's strengths and weaknesses. Mithra Nurodo, he said, bringing his glowing eyes back to Park. But I believe it would be easier for you to call me Thrawn. Thrawn reveals to the Imperials that he was on the remote world because he was politically exiled, something that to Eli's knowledge is rare in Chiss society. He tells Park of how he found the first starfighter already crashed, and took its equipment and comlink. The Chiss's talent for strategy comes to the forefront as he explains how he was able to take out several soldiers, then steal a stormtrooper's armor and hide in the hut as it was taken up to the strike fast. Thrawn declares his people need him, and warns the Imperials of dangers lurking in the galaxy they do not yet know about. He reveals he was exiled over disagreements pertaining to preemptive military strikes. Later, Eli is summoned to meet with Park again, who informs him all recent events are to be considered off the record. Park asks him what he thinks of Thrawn, seeming to be quietly impressed with the Chiss's demeanor. Eli is assigned to be Thrawn's liaison and translator, and to teach him in the language of Basic. To his great surprise, it seems Thrawn will be taken to Coruscant to meet with the Emperor himself. So Eli becomes more acquainted with Thrawn, who learns of the social hierarchy between the core worlds and planets deemed backwater in the Empire. The party arrives at Coruscant, and makes a course directly for the Imperial Palace. Eli is shocked when they are led inside to the Emperor's throne room, before Palpatine himself. Park, Eli, and Thrawn approach Palpatine, and Thrawn warns the Emperor of the unnamed threats lurking in the unknown regions. He offers Palpatine his knowledge and skills in exchange for building a relationship between the Chiss and the Empire. Thrawn claims his word is good, citing how a former servant of Palpatine named Anakin Skywalker would vouch for him. Palpatine, who has recognized Thrawn from the start, admits that the Jedi Skywalker died during the Clone Wars. Palpatine agrees to let Thrawn stay in the Empire and asks to walk with him. Thrawn requests that Eli as his translator be allowed to remain in his company as he is led into a garden area. There is an artistic foundation to the garden's arrangement. There is a pattern in the interaction of curve and line, in the melding and contrast of shape and color, in the subtle play of light and shadow. It bespeaks power and subtlety and great depth of thought. The Emperor privately confides to Thrawn of his great interest in the unknown regions. He receives assurances of Thrawn's loyalty and allows him to retain Eli Vanto. Returning to the others, Eli is then informed his training as a cadet will be concluded at the Royal Imperial Academy on Coruscant. He accompanies Thrawn as they meet Commandant Dienlark, who looks down on Thrawn for his alien nature, and Eli for not being native to the core worlds. Dienlark gives Thrawn 3 months to come up to speed in the Academy, which is when Eli's Academy training cycle will also be up. It is a daunting task, and Thrawn is also given a lieutenant's plaque. It will effectively ensure that other students despise them, both for their off-world and alien statuses and seemingly special treatment. This resentment of aliens also stems from the fallout of the Clone Wars, when many non-humans aligned with the Separatists. Elsewhere, Arinda Price is stopped by Arak Uvis in a corporate building for Price Mining on the planet of Lothal. They operate a dunium mine, a valuable metal resource for the Imperial Navy. Uvis is a representative of the Governor of Lothal, and looks to secure assurances that the Governor will receive equal financial benefits from the profits. He offers to buy a stake in the company, for both he and Arinda know that many powerful parties may look to take over Price Mining to claim the vein. Arinda turns down his proposition of a 21% stake, however, and decides to not warn her mother. She is confident her family's 70% stake will turn away any more of the Governor's efforts to buy them out. However, later that evening, the Governor retaliates by arresting her mother on trumped-up charges of embezzlement. Arinda then goes to Senator Domus Renking for help, where she asserts her mother is innocent. However, it seems Renking cannot lift the embezzlement charge, the arrest being a clear ploy by Governor Azadi to seize control over Price Mining. The only way for Arinda's mother to be freed is to sign over the mine, and Arinda then asks to be transferred to Coruscant, for she has always wanted to leave Lothal. Renking agrees to the terms, and Arinda's parents will be settled on Bataan. Arinda herself is excited to go to Coruscant, and quietly vows to play along with Renking until the time is right to take him down and reclaim her family's mine. A month passes for Eli and Thrawn in the Imperial Academy, and they have already had 4 altercations with other cadets. Eli thinks Thrawn should go to Dienlark to stop the incidents, but Thrawn disagrees. Instead, he believes that if they do not respond, they may bait their attackers into crossing the line and risking official discipline. Soon enough, Eli receives an invitation from Cadets Spank Obar and Rosita Teroy to play cards with them in the metallurgy lab. Thrawn decides to accept the invitation, even though they will be severely punished if they are caught gambling or even in the lab itself. Eli is wary of Orbar, whose family has connections to the Senator of Coruscant. Later that night, they meet Orbar and Teroy in the lab, fully anticipating some sort of trap. Orbar asks to pick Thrawn's brain over military strategy, acting suspiciously casual. Thrawn then pulls out his lieutenant's plaque, stunning Orbar and Teroy. An instructor then bursts in, who Eli immediately realizes is in cahoots with Orbar. However, Thrawn's rank of lieutenant gives him authority over the situation, and he and Eli thus masterfully overcome Orbar and Teroy's attempted entrapment. They walk back to their barracks, but Thrawn suddenly pushes Eli over a barrier. As Eli scrambles to his feet, he sees 3 hooded attackers closing in on Thrawn. Thrawn tries to defend himself, but the disadvantage in numbers is too much. Eli recognizes this as an opportunity to finally free himself from the Emperor's plans surrounding Thrawn. But out of loyalty to Thrawn, he charges the attackers and hurls gravel into their eyes. Eli and Thrawn fight off the attackers as several other cadets arrive at the scene. The attackers flee, and Eli and Thrawn decide to meet with Dienlark. They are able to find clear evidence from comlink records that Orbar and Toroi had hired the assailants, but Dienlark is blatantly skeptical. He is reluctant to punish the troublesome Orbar, both for the cadet's family connections and the fact that in 2 months he will graduate and be out of the Academy's hair. Thrawn proposes a middle ground, asking the attackers to not be charged. Instead, he suggests they be transferred to starfighter pilot training. Thrawn saw innate skills in their attack that he genuinely believes would translate well to fightercraft pilots, and additionally, their removal would weaken Orbar's confidence. Eli is again impressed by Thrawn's lightning-fast mind, and he learns Thrawn was exiled for launching a preemptive strike on pirates attacking defenseless worlds. Elsewhere, Arinda has settled into life on Coruscant. As part of her job, she deals with uncooperative landlords and gets them to investigate the complaints of tenants, all migrants from Lothal. Impressed with how she has handled her new position, Brenking contacts her and transfers her to a new office and apartment, with her new position to be open to all Coruscant citizens. Arinda eagerly accepts, also knowing she is moving closer to having influence in the powerful federal district of the planet. Time passes, and the day of Eli and Thrawn's graduation arrives. His parents make it to Coruscant to congratulate him, and see him off as he and Thrawn prepare to receive their assignments. Thrawn learns he is to be second weapons officer on the Blood Crow, and to Eli's dismay and surprise, he is also assigned there, as Thrawn's aide. Furious, he asks Thrawn if he had arranged this with Palpatine. Thrawn asserts he has not spoken with Palpatine since their first day on Coruscant, but admits he has suggested that given the Blood Crow's assignments to regions where Psi Bisti is spoken, it would be beneficial to have both him and Eli on board. Eli resigns himself to his new career trajectory, and notes that Thrawn seems deadly serious about ascending rapidly in the Imperial ranks. They serve on the Blood Crow for over a year, and after 18 months their captain is replaced, likely the result of Imperial politics. Captain Virgilio, a leader both Thrawn and Eli had respected, is replaced with a younger, more inexperienced Captain Philia Rossi. Unfortunately, Rossi immediately takes a dislike to Thrawn, who has purchased several old weapons from the Clone Wars with his own money. She allows him to keep repairing them for 3 months until they reach Ancien. Eli arrives and Thrawn shows him several functional Mark I buzz droids, which are of particular interest owing to the valuable dunium protecting their brain cores. Rossi settles in over several weeks, and also begins to detest having Eli serving Thrawn, a non-alien, as his aide. Consequently, Eli and Thrawn begin to be assigned the most undesirable jobs and missions on the ship. On one such adventure, they are sent to investigate a distress call from the freighter Dromedar transporting Tabana gas. On board, they encounter a human named Neville Signy, who claims the ship was attacked by pirates. He apparently hid in a storage locker, and the rest of the crew has been kidnapped. The ship's hyperdrive is locked, and Thrawn begins to thoroughly examine the rest of the ship. He decides to request that Rossi send a full crew on board while they try to restart the hyperdrive. If they are unsuccessful, Thrawn recommends removing the Tabana cylinders and transferring them to the Blood Crow, as Eli quietly notes that Rossi may find his suggestions excessive. Unsurprisingly, Rossi is incredulous at Thrawn's propositions, citing the risk of a Tabana explosion damaging both ships as incredibly high. However, Eli is able to convince her to let him and Thrawn stay behind with the tech, knowing the captain will likely seize the opportunity to get rid of them both. Rossi agrees, and 3 crew members named Barlin, Lanio, and Jakib all agree to stay behind with them. Thrawn immediately puts them to work, and while he talks with Signy, Eli notes he does not tell him he is a Chiss. Thrawn then brings out one of his buzz droids, stunning Signy. He plans to use it to break into the compartment holding the cylinders, and just then the hyperdrive becomes active. The small crew prepares to take the ship to Ancien, but then Signy pulls out a blaster, and several pirates suddenly appear. Thrawn takes Signy's deception in stride, ordering the other ensigns to surrender peacefully. The Imperials are taken prisoner, and the pirates delight at their surprise capture of a buzz droid. Thrawn, Eli, and the others are detained with other prisoners in a large metal cage on the pirate ship. Thrawn begins to quietly count, calculating when the pirates take the freighter with Tabana to lightspeed. He tells an ensign to prepare to control the ship remotely should they gain bridge access, seeming to have a plan of sorts. Thrawn then pulls out an insignia plaque. It was given to him at the graduation ceremony by Dienlark, who had forgotten about the original plaque Thrawn had when he arrived at Coruscant. Thrawn reveals that inside he has wired an electric beacon call for the buzz droids. A buzz droid arrives and begins to cut through their cage. The noise attacks several pirates, who open fire on the droid, but they are too late, and the prisoners are freed and quickly overcome their guards. Thrawn immediately orders Barlin and Lanio to access the ship's control system, and then reveals his second buzz droid has opened several sections of the ship to the vacuum of space. The pirates are swept away, and the pirate ship is piloted to Ancion. Despite the success, the pilots on the Dromedar escape with the Tabana. Thrawn and Eli meet with Captain Rossi, having outmaneuvered her deftly. However, the loss of the Tabana, despite the rescue of the crew, gives Rossi enough excuse to suspend both Eli and Thrawn from duty. After they are dismissed, Thrawn turns to Eli and tells him they must find the Dromedar and the missing gas. He questions 3 of the captured pirates to gain leads on where the gas may have been taken. Thrawn deduces they hail from the remnants of the pirate queen Kanna's marauders. Kanna had been destroyed some time ago by Grand Moff Tarkin, but some of her crew had escaped. Using the threat of Tarkin's power as leverage, Thrawn is able to offer the pirates a deal: a civilian transport in exchange for the system where the Tabana has been taken. The pirates take Thrawn up on his offer and tell him to search the planet of Katum. The methodical success of Thrawn greatly impresses Eli and Imperial Admiral Wiskovis. Thrawn then asks to go on the mission himself, offering to cede credit to Wiskovis if he succeeds and take the fall if he fails, with Eli as his witness. Wiskovis grudgingly agrees, and Thrawn also reveals that based on clues in the pirates' dialect, the gas is being held separately on the world of Uba. Imperial forces are redirected to Katum and Uba, with the aim of finally taking down the pirates. Eli and Thrawn, meanwhile, take a flight back to Coruscant. As they are still suspended from duty, Thrawn is subject to a court-martial on Coruscant to give an accounting for his handling of the Dromedar situation. Meanwhile, life continues as normal for Arinda Price. She has dinner with her friend Jwahir Madras, and has continued to try and work her way up the Coruscant social ladder. Arinda is also aware that Renking may take notice of her ambition, but she has formed connections of her own. Jwahir is one of them, and she takes her and another friend named Driller to an Imperial ball. It is a large event, and they pass under the radar as Arinda, the highest ranking of the 3, is still merely a senator's aide. Arinda then notices a group of Imperial officials, and among them are Thrawn and Eli Vanto, talking with Renking himself. Arinda is able to introduce herself into the conversation, meeting Thrawn, Eli, and Colonel Wolf Yularen of the ISB. She learns of a recently successful mission to rescue a kidnapped freighter crew and stolen Tabana gas from pirates. Thrawn is now becoming a rising star in the Imperial Navy, and Renking then asks Arinda to deliver a data card to Moff Gotti. Renking departs, and the group splits up. Arinda finds Gotti and gives him the data card. She waits for him to download its contents, but then upon Gotti returning the card, she notices it is different. Gotti seems to have swapped out the data card with a fake, and upon noticing Arinda catching on to the ploy, sprays her with Polstein spice. It is a highly illegal substance, and will essentially frame Arinda for serious crimes that will lead to her imprisonment. Elsewhere, Colonel Yularen introduces Eli and Thrawn to several prominent men and women, a slightly awkward affair given Eli's backwater status and Thrawn's alien nature. However, they then learn that Signy has managed to escape Admiral Wiskovis on Uba, and many of the recovered Tabana cylinders on the Dromedar were found empty. Meanwhile, Arinda remains trapped with Gotti, who has deduced that Renking looked to plant false data in his computer. He blackmails Arinda into returning the fake data card to the senator as if nothing happened, threatening to have her arrested for spice possession. Left with no other choice, Arinda complies, dropping off the fake card and heading back to Driller's apartment. The next day, Renking summons her to his office for a general staff meeting. He reveals allegations of financial and corporate discrepancies have been filed against him. As a result, he will return to Lothal, and his funding has been cut. Arinda's office position is terminated, and after the crowd is cleared, Renking calls Arinda over. Furious, he reveals he knows what she did for Gotti, and also evicts her from her apartment. The cutthroat Coruscant politics have now taken everything from Arinda, and Jwahir and Driller offer her a place to stay for the rest of the week. Thrawn's court-martial concludes, with the panel finding him cleared of all charges. Eli finds himself wondering if serving Thrawn is something he preferred to do over serving in the shipping industry, and Thrawn then brings up the subject of Dunium. The Chiss had noticed Signy's interest in the material in the buzz droids, and now speculates that the Empire may be working on a large-scale secret project. Eli offers to look into any trails of money leading to anything substantial, and is then approached by an aide of Moff Gotti. She praises Eli, and then offers him a new position as a military attaché and a quick pathway to promotion. The offer seems almost too good to be true, and Eli suddenly realizes that Gotti is looking to isolate him from Thrawn. The Chiss's ascension and strategic genius has sparked jealousy from many in the military, and in the aftermath of the Tabana incident, he will be promoted to captain. Feeling a strong sense of loyalty to the alien he deems his friend, Eli ties his career forever to Thrawn and rejects Gotti's offer. He returns to Thrawn, who has received his new assignment. He has been made a captain, a first officer on the light cruiser Thunder Wasp in the Mid-Rim. Eli will accompany him, still as the rank of an aide with no promotion of his own. Meanwhile, Arinda visits an office for citizen assistance. She manages to manipulate her experience in a way to be serviced by a grouchy, rude employee. Arinda then promptly speaks with the direct supervisor and pitches for the employee to be fired and herself to be hired as the replacement. Her boldness pays off, and while the employee isn't fired, Arinda is still offered a job at the office. Thrawn and Eli continue carrying out missions for the Empire on board the Thunder Wasp, now serving under Commander Alfred Shano. They detain several smugglers who are smuggling iridium inside mollusk shells. Shano had been slow to accept Thrawn under his command, but the Chiss's flat-out competence is winning him over. Thrawn, in the meantime, has also continued his studies into old Clone Wars-era military equipment. Eli has shown a list of such artifacts that Thrawn has bought so far, as well as a galaxy-wide catalog of buying patterns. He also notices there has been an increase in demand for vulture droids. Thrawn reveals he believes a mysterious figure called Night Swan is responsible for the recent buying spree, and as vulture droids can really only be used for military purposes, may pose a threat. Night Swan is someone Thrawn has been tracking for the past year, consulting with Colonel Yularen and even the Emperor. Thrawn also informs Eli that the world of Umbara may be of interest, as the detained smugglers had overheard their superior, also presumed to be Night Swan, mention the planet. The Chiss returns to his cabin, where he has access to the Thunder Wasp computer library. There, he has constructed a massive collection of data on one simple, yet extraordinarily insightful thing: art. For some it was a measure of culture, for others it was a measure of wealth, for most it was a matter of simple enjoyment. For Thrawn, it was an invaluable tool. To Thrawn, nothing in a species' art was obscure or insignificant. All the threads tied together, all the brushstrokes spoke to him, all the light curves told the story of their creator. Most important of all, the relationships among art, culture, and military doctrine could be deduced, and what could be deduced could be countered. The study of a species' art is the key to Thrawn's uncanny military perceptions and tactical brilliance. Thrawn enters a meditative trance of sorts presently, examining the Umbaran pieces before him. He is interrupted by the arrival of Eli, who informs him they have arrived at the Umbara system. They will link up with the Star Destroyer Foremost, commanded by Admiral Carlo Gendling. The Admiral is confident that Umbara, a world that has resisted Imperial control, will submit to the authority of their ships. Thrawn, however, based on his studies, believes the Umbarans will not attack until they know they have a significant advantage over the Imperial force. Nonetheless, Gendling issues an ultimatum to the planet, demanding the leaders of the insurgency surrender and hand over their weapons. The response is quick, and a force of 400 spacecraft swarm towards the Foremost and Thunder Wasp. They turn out to be vulture droids, and the Thunder Wasp readies itself for a battle. Thrawn, however, believes the attack to not be from the Umbarans themselves, but a probing strike to weaken them enough for the real assault. The small, agile vulture droids soon wreak havoc on the Thunder Wasp's defenses, being too quick to be pinned down by the Imperial gunners. Commander Shano seems to have no answer, but then Thrawn snaps into action. He takes command of the Chief Censor Officer's position, accompanied by Eli at his side. It quietly usurps Shano's command, and Thrawn begins analyzing the suspiciously coordinated attacks by the vulture droids. He and Eli then deduce the droids are being controlled via a direct transmitter on one of Umbara's moons. Shano hails Gendling, but the Admiral does not believe in the strategy and refuses to bombard the moon. Cheno cuts off the comm, and Thrawn then switches gears and redirects the gunner's fire to key areas where the droids will be most exposed. Slowly, the battle turns back to the Empire's favor. All the Vulture droids are destroyed, and Imperial ground troops are able to land and detain the insurgency leaders. However, Gendling is furious at Cheno for his ship's actions in battle, deeming it a subversion of his authority as an admiral. Cheno takes the fall for Thrawn, and does so with grace. Though he will be subjected to a court-martial, Cheno fully believes in Thrawn's genius, and is confident in leaving the Thunder Wasp under the Chiss's command. Eli investigates the transmitter source more, finding it connected to the Umbaran mining districts. Interestingly enough, the planet also holds several Dunium deposits and is unusually adept at preventing smugglers from stealing its metals. Thrawn then comes to believe the Night Swan was able to stage a failed attack on the Empire in order for Umbara to fall under its control. It will be easier for smugglers to sneak past Imperial inspectors rather than the Umbarans now, and Thrawn deduces that the detained mollusk shell smugglers were a plant to lure him to Umbara. The Night Swan wanted Thrawn to see the beginning of his plan, and a dangerous game of cat and mouse begins. Meanwhile, Arinda settles into her new job. She gets a surprise visit from Jwahir, who she has not seen for 6 months. They have dinner with Driller, and there Arinda learns Jwahir has opened a dojo training bodyguards for the Senate. Driller offers Arinda a position with his advocacy group for mining rights called Higher Skies, and she accepts and moves in with Jwahir. Thus, she once again enters the realm of the social elite of Coruscant, vowing to never again be sent back to the lower levels. However, it appears that Driller's group is very lightly staffed, perhaps not at all. Arinda plays along, content with remaining in close proximity to the powerful individuals in the Empire. Driller is particularly concerned with a surge in Imperial takeovers of mining facilities and planets. As Arinda scans over a report, she notices an entry noting the attack on Umbara. She recognizes the name Thrawn, remarking at the rapid ascension of the Chiss. Her work finishes for the evening, and Arinda travels back to Jwahir's apartment in a seedier part of the planet. However, her turbolift malfunctions and takes her to a much lower and dangerous level. She calls Jwahir, who directs her to another turbolift. Arinda is then cornered by several thugs, but is saved just in time by Jwahir and a fellow bodyguard named Otlis. Elsewhere, Imperial High Command relieves Commander Cheno of duty, a decision that baffles Thrawn. Eli educates him more on the intricacies of Navy politics, also warning Thrawn that his ascension may inadvertently breed more trouble in that manner. They then meet with Colonel Yularen, who tells them they have found no more leads on the Night Swan. Yularen speculates that the Night Swan may be planning a large operation. The subject turns to Coruscant, where the Imperials become interested in touring one of the many dojos that work with Senate bodyguards. They end up visiting several, including one Yincham dojo. There, Eli recognizes Arinda Price, who after her scare in the lower levels has begun hanging around the dojo to develop contacts with high-level bodyguards. The Imperials then observe a sparring session, and Thrawn also notices Jwahir tense up briefly when Arinda tells him she works for Higher Skies. He decides to investigate the group further, with Yularen agreeing to use ISB resources. They then receive new orders. The Thunder Wasp will undergo repairs for 4 weeks, during which Thrawn will preside at the Imperial Palace. He is also now the new captain of the ship, though there is still no promotion for Eli yet again. In the meantime, Arinda receives a surprise offer from Otlis for a sparring session. He invites her to his employer's office, who turns out to be none other than Moff Gotti. She overcomes her shock as Gotti then accuses the Higher Skies group of plotting to take him down. Arinda knows of no such plot, but Gotti does not believe her. He forces her to become his double agent and feed him information on Higher Skies. Arinda is thus blackmailed by Gotti again, with Otlis revealed to be an agent for the Moff all along. She returns to her apartment, but this time Arinda may have a way out. She calls Thrawn and asks to set up a meeting. They reunite in a diner, where Arinda confides to Thrawn an Imperial officer feels her group has threatened him. Thrawn learns of the blackmail, and is given the report of Gotti's mine being attacked. Gotti had been mining Dunium there, and had never registered it so he could sell it back to the military at a profit. Arinda asks Thrawn to turn the report over to Colonel Yularen. Thrawn agrees, but says they must wait. He believes the official, whose name Arinda has not yet disclosed to him, may have an informant within the ISB. Arinda then gambles a bit, revealing to Thrawn the Thunder Wasp has been put last in line for repairs. It is presumably to keep him out of active duty, and Thrawn thanks her for the intel. He gives her some advice on how to attack her blackmailer, and they depart. Later that evening, Arinda calls a disgruntled Moff Gotti. She claims to have found several key Higher Skies files, including one on Grand Moff Tarkin. An eager Gotti orders her to immediately bring the data card to his office, not wanting to wait to decrypt it. Time passes, with Thrawn and Eli relegated to menial office work. Eli still has not been promoted, and Thrawn then informs him he has accepted a new assignment. It concerns a land dispute on Cyphar between the Afe clan of the Cyphari species and human colonists. The Afes have been raiding the colonists, claiming it is retaliation for trespassing and other raids from the colonists. And perhaps not coincidentally, on that small, unassuming world there has been a recent increase in shellfish exports. Thrawn believes the humans may be trying to smuggle out precious metals from the Afes lands, and sees the fingerprints of the Night Swan all over the dispute. Additionally, the dispute is part of a larger trend of similar such conflicts and smuggling activity increasing throughout the Empire. Eli and Thrawn fly to the planet and meet with the colonist leaders. They try to discern who the Night Swan's informant may be, but initially make little leeway. The two fly out to investigate the disputed territory, with Mayor Benchel insisting they take a guard. They meet the Afe chief Joko, and Thrawn devises a plan to trap the conspirators, who he believes to be some of the human colonists. Thrawn sets up a camp for him and Eli near some crops in the disputed area. He and Eli note the plants are stunted, presumably from heavy metal poisoning. Sure enough, after some time 3 speeders arrive and begin digging into an ore vein beneath the damaged crops. One of the humans, Tano, catches their eye. Eli traces his background, and comes to believe Tano may be a chemist specializing in the production of skarn, a variety of spice. Thrawn calls for stormtrooper reinforcements, but Tano gets spooked and makes plans to leave early. Thrawn and Eli then move out, and open fire on the speeders to disable them. A firefight breaks out, but Thrawn and Eli are able to detain the conspirators. Thrawn summons a TIE pilot named Gim, and has him fly a tracing path over the ore vein so the Thunder Wasp can bombard the field. Chief Joko is outraged at the destruction of the Afe's land, but the damage is done. Thrawn is satisfied that the Skarn operation has been stopped, but has also recaptured the ire of Imperial officials for bypassing protocol in his actions. Later, Gim approaches Eli and reveals he was one of the cadets who attacked him and Thrawn years ago. Meanwhile, Arinda continues her double agent work against Higher Skies. Driller then approaches her with a new assignment, to advocate for Higher Skies to Grand Moff Tarkin. She secures a meeting with the daunting Moff, and gives him a data card compromising Higher Skies' espionage efforts. Arinda tells Tarkin the ploy was recommended to her by Thrawn in exchange for some favors. She then brings up the name of Moff Gotti, which Tarkin instantly reacts to. There is a deep, burning political rivalry between the two men, and now Arinda exploits her double-crossing of Gotti to petition for Tarkin's patronage. She asks for the governorship of Lothal to complete her revenge against Azadi and Senator Renking, and also gives Tarkin another data card containing intel on every Lothal mine, on and off the books. Tarkin agrees to the deal, and he and Arinda then deliver their masterstroke. Imperial forces arrive at Jwahir's dojo and arrest her, for it is revealed the bodyguards were actually being trained to blackmail and even assassinate their patrons. Arinda has betrayed Higher Skies entirely, handing over all her intel on them to the ISB. Driller has also been arrested, and Arinda revels in her ascension to power. The Thunder Wasp returns to service as normal, with Thrawn and Eli resuming their hunt for the Night Swan. They manage to take down 4 more smuggling operations, but the Night Swan continues to elude them. Eli by now has served with Thrawn for 4 years, and still he cannot figure out why the Night Swan is seeking Dunium. Thrawn's mysterious meetings with the Emperor in his palace have also continued, but the Chiss remains tight-lipped about those discussions. Presently, the two attend a meeting in which Grand Moff Tarkin arrives. To Eli's surprise, Thrawn is promoted to the rank of Commodore, and he himself is granted the rank of Lieutenant Commander. Governor Price of Lothal also sends her personal congratulations to Thrawn. Additionally, Thrawn and Eli have been transferred to a Star Destroyer, the ISD Chimera. It is a remarkable ascension, but largely their missions continue as normal. One day, they receive a distress call from the troop transport Semper. However, the ship seems to be empty, and Thrawn tells Eli their main responsibility will be to deliver stormtroopers to the ship so the Chimera can fight off its attackers. However, when they arrive at the coordinates, they find the entire crew of the Semper killed, and the attackers gone. Thrawn is temporarily barred from entering the troop quarters by a stormtrooper, apparently under orders of secrecy directly from Coruscant. However, Thrawn orders him aside, raising his voice for what seems like the first time Eli can ever remember. Upon examining the quarters, Thrawn and Eli come to believe the Semper was originally a slave ship for beings larger than humans. Further analysis of the attack implies the attackers were looking to free the slaves, which Thrawn then deduces to be Wookiees from Kashyyyk. Eli and Thrawn track the Semper's destination, and likely the site of the next attack, to the space station Land's End 26. They fly directly there to find a battle already raging. Thrawn observes the Wookiees' fighting patterns and defeats the attackers, then deciding to leave the slaves into custody of the station. Elsewhere, Arinda at last returns to Lothal to resettle there, having only ruled in proxy for the past year. She meets with the Imperial Minister Maketh Tua to discuss a recent decline in refinery output. Tua tells her the mines have been running low on quality ores, and the Dunium vein is already completely empty. Arinda closes down price mining as a result, infuriating Senator Renking. However, she then makes a call, for Arinda has deduced from the report that the mining boss placed a block of granite in front of the vein, which continues on the other side. Arinda begins to fully industrialize Lothal, often taking farmland from locals to build new factories or military facilities. She pushes past the unrest those policies stir up, and her eyes continue to look outwards for more power. Arinda looks to make Lothal a bastion of strength in the Outer Rim, and that involves building up their naval presence. She learns of the world of Kitoni is looking to bolster their relations with the Imperial Navy, and immediately sets out for Coruscant. Arinda calls Commodore Thrawn to ask for his help, and he agrees to support her argument that Lothal would be a better staging place for the Empire. She then visits Renking and asks him to talk to the governor of Kitoni to convince them to withdraw their proposal. Arinda later petitions her case in front of a board, where the contract ends up being granted to Lothal. However, Renking is then approached by an ISB official and is accused of bribery. Arinda's hands are clean, since she never advocated for bribery, simply persuasion. As she prepares to depart for Lothal, she is informed that Drawhir sent her several letters, but declines to read them for the time being. The Chimera is then tasked with assisting Admiral Jock Donasius in taking down an uprising on Botajet. It is a bold gambit by the planet, which is assuredly outgunned by the Empire. Eli is concerned that Thrawn is being set up for failure, as he will either be defeated and lose face or be seen as a cruel oppressor if he wins. Thrawn seems nonplussed, instead continuing to ponder over the Dunium and smuggling increases. He believes all the materials are being concentrated towards one project involving massive hyperdrives and sunlight engines. Thrawn questions the wisdom of the allocation of Imperial resources. It seems their one-time captain of old, Philia Rossi, may prove to be the key to solving the mystery before them. Thrawn tracks her ore freighters to a presumed destination, perhaps the site of the Empire's secret project. The Chimera arrives at Botajet, where 2 corvettes and a squadron of fighters rise up to meet them. Eli notes that several turbolaser clusters are located near the governor's palace, almost seeming to bait them into bombarding the building. Thrawn sends out a squadron of a special unit of TIE fighters as Governor Quessel hails them. He scoffs as Thrawn asks him to disable the turbolaser encampments near the palace. In response, the TIE fighters are ordered to destroy the guns, and Quessel resolves to die a martyr. Additionally, Thrawn maneuvers the Chimera in a position in front of the corvettes. He reveals that Quessel is actually on one of the corvettes, and locks both of them in place with tractor beams. Quessel had been planning to bait the Imperials into destroying the palace, and then escaping with several valuable pieces of stolen art. The governor is detained, and the uprising on Botajet is quashed. For his successes, Thrawn is promoted to the rank of Admiral, continuing to skyrocket through the Imperial Navy ranks. He and Eli are summoned to a meeting with prominent Imperial commanders, including Colonel Yularen and Fleet Admiral Donasius. Thrawn, as Admiral, is now assigned the 96th Task Force, and meets 2 other admirals of the ISD's Judicator and Stalwart. Also present via projector are several planetary governors, including Governor Price of Lothal. The mission concerns the Bataan sector, where High Command worries rises in criminal and insurgent activities may become a larger, coordinated threat. The world of Bataan will be the Empire's starting point, as it seems to be the focal hub of the unrest. Recently, insurgents on the planet took over the Imperial garrison on Scrim Island, taking more than 100 prisoners. Thrawn is commanded to deal with the insurgents, and he notes their defenses pose a formidable challenge. He wishes to study the facility more, but Admiral Durrell scoffs at his caution and Donasius orders him into action. Thrawn is instead redirected to the planet Salmon, with Durrell being ordered to Scrim Island. It is a slight political loss of face for Thrawn, but the new admiral is sure Durrell and Donasius are underestimating the situation on Bataan. Thrawn begins studying Samuni art in preparation for their assignment, and then surprisingly orders Captain Faro of the Chimera to go ahead to Samon. He and Eli will take a separate freighter, and Faro is ordered to draw the Salmon insurgents out of their defensive positions to destroy them. Thrawn and Eli, however, will travel to Bataan to observe Durrell's attack. As they land to observe the unfolding siege, Eli is quick to pick up on many of the same patterns observed by Thrawn, indicative of his growing tactical abilities. The two watch as Durrell's ships open fire on the garrison, but its shields hold. The Imperial forces cannot break the garrison, and ion cannons on the ground wreak havoc on the light cruisers and frigates. The insurgency commander seems to be more than capable of holding their own, and the ISD Judicator begins taking damage. Then, 8 small freighters break away from the garrison and set a course towards the main continent. One splits off and seems to take to space, and Thrawn immediately orders Eli to hail it before it can jump to hyperspace. As they are in a nondescript freighter, Eli is able to pose as a weapon smuggler and make contact with the pilot. They are able to get coordinates for a meeting point, and chart a course there as Durrell's attack falls apart. Thrawn reveals he had ordered another of his captains to accompany them in secret to Bataan, and they are to pursue the other 7 freighters while he and Eli track the 8th. At the coordinates, they note the freighter hails from the Clone Wars era. Thrawn decides to stay on board their freighter, and gives Eli his old lieutenant's plaque with a wired distress signal. Eli boards the Nomad-style freighter, and is taken to its commander. To his utter shock, he is brought before the former pirate Signy, who reveals himself to be the Night Swan. Night Swan states his desire to take down the Empire, with the notoriously competent Thrawn being a significant obstacle to his plans. He tells Eli of Thrawn's past and how the Chiss had teamed up with Anakin Skywalker during the Clone Wars. Then, a soldier enters and informs Night Swan they have detected a radiation leak from Eli's freighter. A squad is sent to investigate, and it seems Thrawn will be flushed out. Eli's blaster is taken, but then the squad leader patches in. Something is wrong, and then a massive explosion is heard on the comms. Eli presses the distress signal in his plaque, which then causes his confiscated blaster to explode in a cloud of smoke. In the chaos, he slips away from the Night Swan's men as alarms begin to blare throughout the ship. Eli sees Thrawn in the tumult, and they steal one of the Night Swan's freighters. He learns he had been sent to gather intel on the Night Swan, who Thrawn had suspected to be present on Bataan all along. They return to Bataan, where Thrawn's captain Brento had coordinated her ships to tractor beam the Judicator out to a safe distance. The admirals reconvene with Donasius, with Admiral Kinshara reporting success on Danash. Captain Faro and the Chimera were also able to quash the insurgency on Salmon. Only Durrell failed in his attack, and now Donasius orders him out of action and gives command of the Scrim Island assault back to Thrawn. The 96th Task Force light cruisers are sent in first, drawing the ion cannon fire. Thrawn maneuvers them into new positions and swings the Chimera into the fray. He opens fire into the water surrounding the island, the powerful blast causing massive tsunami waves to obliterate the ion cannon emplacements. The insurgents surrender, and the island is taken in yet another commanding victory for Thrawn. Arinda is shuttled on board the Chimera and reunites with Thrawn. Efforts are underway to retake the rest of Bataan. However, Arinda reveals that her parents are among the refugees trapped in the Creek Path mining and refining complex where the insurgents' main base is. She decides to travel undercover to the complex, and offers to scout out the base's defenses for Thrawn while making contact with her parents. ISB agent Goodry will accompany her, and Thrawn, despite his apprehensions, agrees to the plan. Thrawn then positions his task force in an unconventional manner, with 3 of the damaged light cruisers out in front and seemingly out of range of support from the Chimera. Eli worries that if they are to serve as bait, the men on board will be slaughtered. Arinda and Gudry make it through several security checkpoints under disguise and begin to search for Arinda's parents' house. Gudry wants to refocus on scouting the base, but Arinda insists on finding her parents first. They find the house, and Arinda reunites with her mother and father. She is briefed on the corruption of Governor Restos, and they ask Arinda's father to help them break into the base. However, her father is sympathetic to the insurgency, believing them to be fighting for people's rights and against oppression. Nonetheless, they are able to convince him to guide them in by lying that one of Gudry's friends is being held captive there. Meanwhile, Thrawn sits in his office, studying Batanese art. He believes the time is coming to finally deliver a decisive strike against the Night Swan. Thrawn hails his nemesis on a direct comm, and asks to set up a personal meeting. Night Swan is hesitant, but Thrawn assures him he does not seek out his death or capture. Elsewhere, Gudry and Arinda make it through the mining complex's outer perimeter. Arinda then slips away and calls her father's comm, pretending to be her mother. She fakes a sickness, and her father rushes back to his home with Arinda while Gudry stays behind. Thrawn meets with Night Swan at last, who confides he has been tracking all the precious metals being sequestered by the Empire. The secret Imperial project is of great interest to him, but he only reveals that Grand Moff Tarkin is involved. Night Swan looks to stop the project, fearing what it may be, and has been attempting to unite the insurgency groups across the galaxy into one front. Thus far, he has been unsuccessful, and he then asks Thrawn why he has continued to serve the Empire. Thrawn then reveals a secret of his own. I was exploring the edges of the new Empire shortly after the Clone War. I had witnessed a small part of that conflict, and had seen the chaos the collapse of the Republic had created throughout the region. Thrawn references dark threats that only the Chiss know of, and that the Ascendancy had needed to assess whether the Empire could be an ally with them against those dangers. Thus, Thrawn's exile had been staged, in order for the Empire to discover him and bring him into its military. Thrawn's past experience with a Jedi General gave him the credibility he needed, and all these years he has been studying the Empire's politics and military capabilities. He believes it to be an imperfect but necessary source of order to prevent chaos and anarchy. Thrawn then shocks Night Swan by offering him a position in the Chiss Ascendancy. However, Night Swan's followers must disband and surrender their weapons. Night Swan shakes his head, stating the people will rise up again sometime later against the injustices of the Empire. He chooses to stay in the complex, and before he departs, asks Thrawn to protect the refugees' lives as best he can. Night Swan departs, and then Colonel Yularen appears behind Thrawn and accuses him of treachery. He holds Thrawn at blaster point, demanding to know his full strategy. Thrawn explains the vulnerable position of the cruisers is intentional so they can jump to hyperspace when attacked, and then learns contact has been lost with Governor Pryce. Arinda and her father return to her confused mother, where she reveals she hopes to get both of them away from the impending battle. Her parents begin packing, but then Gudry arrives, furious that Arinda has deviated from his plan. He was able to find an explosives cache in the shield generator of the complex, and the Empire is now ready to obliterate the mining complex. Arinda asks for her parents to be evacuated, but Gudry says only they will be allowed to escape. Arinda then attacks him, wrestling his blaster away. She is struck in the head and falls, but then shoots Gudry 3 times in the chest. Thrawn, looking to recover Arinda, sends in troops to find her. His task force braces for an attack from the insurgent ships as Eli watches the battle begin to unfold. 30 of the Night Swan ships will be gunning for the Chimera and the cruisers, but Thrawn remains stoic as ever. The ground assault on the insurgents is launched as well. On the surface, Arinda realizes she needs to hide Gudry's body from the incoming Imperials. She and her parents are stopped at a checkpoint, but she uses Gudry's comm as a detonator to trigger an explosion. The guard is distracted, and she quickly steps forward and shoots him, claiming to her parents that shrapnel killed him instead. Eli tensely watches as the insurgent ships close in, but is surprised when they bypass the cruisers and continue towards the Chimera. Thrawn orders the cruisers to detach from the repair barges connected to them. Squadrons of TIE fighters are then released from the barges, having been hidden there the entire time. At the same time, Arinda and her parents make it back to Imperial forces, but she learns a team has already been sent to the house with Gudri's body. She cannot let them find the body, and then chooses to detonate the bombs planted in the explosives cache. The stronghold erupts in a ball of fire, which can be seen by Eli from the battle raging above. To him, it appears as if the insurgents have destroyed their own complex, along with the many civilian homes near the mining facility. Thrawn calmly orders for search and rescue teams to be sent down, and that the remaining ships battling the Chimera must be destroyed. Arinda lies to her parents, defending the Empire and claiming the insurgents were the ones who destroyed the stronghold. Though the shield had been able to somewhat contain the blast, thousands of civilians died in the explosion. Arinda sends her parents away to safety, and is then summoned back to the Chimera. There, she attends a briefing of the disastrous outcome of the battle, showing little remorse for the insurgents. Arinda manages to hide her involvement in the explosion despite Yularen and Thrawn's suspicions. Night Swan also died in the blast, and Thrawn then learns the Emperor has requested his presence at the Imperial Palace. As preparations are made to leave, Thrawn confronts Arinda in private, knowing she is hiding something but cannot prove it. Arinda confidently states that Thrawn will have need of her as a political advisor of sorts, and then pushes him to go for command over 7th Fleet. She departs, and Eli arrives and also voices his suspicions of Arinda. Thrawn arrives later at the throne room of the Emperor, who congratulates him for his victory on Bataan. Thrawn then demands to know the details on the Death Star, revealed to be the secret project of the Empire. Palpatine deduces he fears the weapon will be turned against the Chiss, and Thrawn voices his concern over allocating too many resources to a project contained only in one system. The Emperor assures him he has no plans to move against the Chiss, and Darth Vader then enters the room. Thrawn is promoted to the rank of Grand Admiral, and 2 of the Emperor's greatest servants meet for the first time. And sometime later, Eli Vanto, now in possession of Thrawn's personal journal, arrives in Chiss space. He meets with Admiral Aralani of the Chiss Defense Fleet, and offers his services to help the Chiss Ascendancy. Padme Amidala of Naboo receives a message concerning the planet of Batuu near the Unknown Regions. She tells her secret husband, Jedi Knight Anakin Skywalker, of the report. Padme decides to go there herself, an idea that Anakin has misgivings about. However, he cannot accompany her, for as a general in the Clone Wars he has been called to action elsewhere. The events around his former apprentice Ahsoka Tano leaving the Jedi Order still weigh on Anakin as well. They bid each other farewell, with Anakin dropping into another battle. The fighting blurs for him, and time passes. Padme sends no word over a period of days, worrying Anakin. He tries to track her ship to no avail, and duty to the Republic and Jedi prevents him from searching for his wife. Then he receives the news that he has been dreading. A report surfaces of a ship matching Padme's being found abandoned on Batuu, its passengers missing. Anakin thus takes his interceptor fighter with R2-D2 on an immediate course to Batuu, a remote world with only a few trading settlements. A freighter then docks near his hyperspace ring, and when Anakin hails it does not immediately identify itself. Then, a calm voice addresses him, asking an irritated Anakin why he, as a wartime general, is traveling alone. The voice reveals they know about Padme's disappearance, and offers a partnership of sorts to seek out more information. They turn out to be Commander Mithra Nurodo of the Expansionary Defense Fleet of the Chiss Ascendancy, and Thrawn reveals he wishes to learn more about the Clone Wars. Thus an unlikely alliance is formed, with Thrawn guiding Anakin to the site of Padme's ship. They soon find it parked in a small clearing, surrounded by a group of unsavory characters cutting into its hatch. Anakin arrives at the ship before Thrawn and confronts the bandits. They immediately open fire, but then Thrawn arrives at the scene and seems to talk the gang down. He also calms Anakin, who initially worries the smugglers abducted Padme. Thrawn assures him this is not the case, and the gang disperses. They then break into the ship themselves, but Anakin finds no signs of violence inside. Thrawn finds logs suggesting Duja's nomad ship had left Batuu a week ago. It seems Padme went with her, but Anakin does not know why she failed to send a message to him or Coruscant. He and Thrawn decide to travel to the nearby outpost of Black Spire to find more information. They first visit a cantina, where Thrawn immediately notices several beings converging towards them. He guesses they may be looking to gain access to Padme's stranded ship. Thrawn approaches the bartender and offers to pay for information. He shows him a holo of Padme and Duja, but the bartender doesn't recognize them. Suddenly, he steps back from the bar and the mugs in front explode into white smoke. Anakin becomes woozy as Thrawn leaps on top of the bar. Blaster fire erupts as several attackers emerge. Thrawn fights them off as Anakin hails R2 and passes out. He awakens later to an empty cantina, and Thrawn sitting near the dead bodies of their assailants. Thrawn knows now that Anakin is a Jedi, and they are holed up in the cantina. There is a fifth attacker as well, who Thrawn notes stayed outside during the fray. Thrawn deduces that based on the coordination of the attack, the aim had likely been to assassinate Anakin. Anakin has R2 jam the comms in the area so they can track the fifth assassin to their leader. Thrawn plans to have Anakin be carried back to his fighter feigning injury, with R2 to fly him away. Thrawn will then tail the assassin to capture and interrogate them. Anakin proposes instead they use one of the dead bodies as a puppet, and he makes it back to his fighter and R2. Anakin takes off, but an explosion throws the ship out of control. He manages to crash land it in a forest, and is immediately attacked by a droid assassin. Anakin redirects a bolt back at the droid to destroy it. Thrawn then appears with the captured fifth assassin, and shows Anakin his ship. It seems to be of separatist origins, and they begin to search its cargo. It is then revealed that when Padme first arrived at Batuu, she hailed Duja but received no response. She decided to set out for their designated rendezvous point of Black Spire, and asked some locals where to find a man named Kusef Jovi. Padme was suspicious of them, and was directed to the cantina. However, in front of the cantina she found a wooden box. It turned out to be a coffin, and inside was Duja's body. Hiding her emotions, Padme entered the bar and learned from the bartender that Duja had apparently died in a speeder bike accident. Padme did not believe the story, and composed a song in memory of her friend. She took Duja's brooch and returned to her ship. She flew to a different clearing away from the town and examined the brooch, which was actually a beacon call to Duja's ship. Padme found Duja's ship, and on board a message from her handmaiden. Duja had found a separatist factory on Wookiepedia, a discovery that presumably led to her death. Padme knew she could not wait out the arrival of Anakin or Republic forces, or risk the same fate befalling her. Thus, she decided to fly to Wookiepedia herself, and anticipated a quick journey so she could return to Batuu and surprise Anakin. Presently, Anakin and Thrawn delve further into the assassin ship, finding several shining metal ingots. The ship is being used to transport separatist goods for droid manufacturing, and Thrawn also recognizes a label on a crate he notices the smugglers had. Then, R2 finds something from the command deck and discovers the separatist ship was bound for Kermau. However, Thrawn speculates the easily discovered data may have been planted as a decoy, and finds there are 11 other inhabitable systems on the way to Kermau. The Chiss then reveals that he had planted listening devices back in the cantina, and has learned 5 individuals have entered since they left. They seem to be part of the same group that attacked Anakin and Thrawn, and the two decide to head back to Black Spire to confront them. They immediately catch the eyes of 5 thugs outside, but Thrawn is still wounded from the first firefight. Thrawn then guns their landspeeder forwards, ramming it into the thugs. Anakin leaps off and is able to subdue them, and he and Thrawn take 2 prisoners into a nearby shop for questioning. 2 more aliens rush out with blasters to confront them, but stop and lead them further inside. There, Thrawn and Anakin encounter the bartender again, who is revealed to be in league with the smugglers and separatists. He answers to the Duke of Batuu, and has been coordinating with the smugglers to steal shipments from the party of separatists that visit Batuu during their runs. It was Padme's handmaiden Duja who identified one of the shipments, however, and found the separatist connection. The separatists discovered her and in turn began scoping out the smugglers stealing from them. The thieves have been trying to escape Batuu when Padme then arrived, but they do not know where she has gone or who killed Duja. Thrawn declares they are taking the separatist ship to the base on Wookiepedia, and the panicked thieves then attack them. Anakin kills them all except for the bartender Janat, and he and Thrawn learn Padme had left on a different ship. With the schemes at last uncovered, Anakin and Thrawn prepare to take the separatist ship to Wookiepedia, though Anakin is still worried about Padme. Meanwhile, Padme closes in on Wookiepedia and flies towards the surface. However, she takes a hit from a vulture droid. The ship already damaged in a flight from Batu and its police, Padme spirals into a river and hides in an escape pod from more patrolling vulture droids. She floats down the river and catches evidence of a small town by its banks, as well as a large mine in conjunction with the Separatist base. The river takes her near the factory, and Padme exits the pod and stumbles up the bank. A hand suddenly grabs her and drags her into some nearby trees. There, 3 men named Simi, Lebjao, and Huga immediately suspect her of being a spy, worried the Separatist droids will trace her to them. To prevent them from reporting her to the Duke, Padme gives them a Coruscant gem. She claims her uncle Anakin will arrive soon with reward money, but learns the comm triad in the area is down. The 3 men agree to take Padme back to their home, along the way telling her how the Duke and Separatists took over the local factory and moved them to maintenance jobs. Padme quietly speculates the Separatists are mining for the valuable substances dunium or quadrinium, but puzzles over why so few of the original staff were retained. The men show her Lebjao's boat, where they fish from in secret due to the meager rations given to them. Padme gives them a message to deliver to Anakin via the nearby town, and begins to hide out in the boat until they bring back more food and supplies for her. As they fly to Mokij, Thrawn learns more about the Clone Wars from Anakin as they plan on how to break into the base there. Anakin poses as a smuggling captain and they fly down to the factory, with Thrawn taking in its layout. Anakin believes Padme may be somewhere inside, and deftly lands their ship inside the compound. A tall man strides out to meet them, wearing a long cloak resembling that of Count Dooku. He is Serenian also, and begins to question Anakin. Their bluff is quickly called, and Anakin asks if the Count's people have captured Padme. The Count knows little of her, and the tense encounter soon devolves into a fight. Droids stream out in overwhelming numbers, and Anakin and Thrawn are overcome and thrown into holding cells. The Duke reveals to them he is Duke Solha of Sereno, the same planet as Count Dooku. He departs, and Anakin then reaches out in the Force. He suddenly senses Padme, who is presumably planning something. Thrawn is able to deduce they have a close relationship, and reveals he believes the eastern section of the factory is the main industrial hub. He can gain more intel than Anakin owing to his infrared sight, and has already inferred much of the layout from their brief time in the base. Padme, in the meantime, has been waiting in Lebjao's boat. She puzzles over the entire purpose of the factory, especially as to why the Separatists would station a mine far out near the unknown regions. Padme wonders if Duja had stumbled across a faction splitting off from the Separatists. Over several days, she makes more attempts to speak to a Kurt Lebjao, and eventually learns of the factory's security. Padme manages to convince him to help her break inside, and he shows her a secret entrance. They enter the service level under the compound, where Padme sets up a new hiding place. Lebjao leaves her there as she settles in for the night. A flash of light erupts from her window, and she catches a glimpse of Duke Solha detaining Thrawn and Anakin. All 3, unfortunately, are now trapped in the Duke's base and powerless to help each other. Padme begins to search the barren west wing of the factory, but finds nothing of use. She then encounters a trapdoor, but is dragged into the shadows by Huga and Simi. Padme needs a transponder wristband to make it further inside, but the 2 men tell her they can't be physically transferred from user to user. Meanwhile, Anakin struggles to find a way to escape his cell. Then, Thrawn in his adjacent cell slides him a long cord made of his clothing, and they use it to break out. Huga and Simi take Padme into another area of the factory to get her a maintenance worker's uniform. She learns the factory is run by Duke Solha, and as they sneak on, they encounter little security. However, 2 B-1 battle droids then appear. Padme attempts to bluff her way past them, but resorts to destroying the droids. She moves on alone to find Anakin, with Huga and Simi opting to stay behind out of fear. They direct her to the bins, the cells where Anakin would be imprisoned, and as she departs, Padme promises they will be paid. Elsewhere, Anakin and Thrawn sneak through the factory, with Anakin only using the Force to fight off the droids as his lightsaber has been taken. They must make it back to the roof to reclaim it, and along the way run into Padme. A plan is formulated for Thrawn and Padme to take back Anakin's lightsaber, with Anakin himself to provide a distraction. Soon after they split up, Padme and Thrawn run into Lebjao. Padme warns him a battle is about to break out, and asks him to evacuate the factory. Lebjao is hesitant, as the factory is his and all his people's livelihoods. Thrawn informs him the factory will be destroyed one way or the other, and Lebjow reluctantly agrees to help them. Meanwhile, Anakin follows an oil drip left behind by R2-D2, who has been confiscated by Duke Solha as well. He encounters an assembly line of battle droids, but these ones have a type of fibrous armor he hasn't seen before in the war. R2 is also there off to the side, and then a figure wearing clone trooper armor marches in. The markings match the 212th, the unit of Obi-Wan Kenobi. The figure takes off its helmet and turns out to be Duke Solha. Anakin, with a thin smile, then uses the Force to induce one of the droids to fire a blaster bolt. Solha immediately orders his droids to begin searching for Anakin as the lights go off. Meanwhile, Padme and Thrawn grapple up a wall onto the roof of the factory. Again, they encounter no security whatsoever. Then, Padme sees in the sky 20 glowing spheres descending towards the factory. Vulture droids also emerge and open fire on the spheres. Thrawn seems unbothered, and they recover Anakin's lightsaber. However, the Chiss then drops off the roof with the weapon. He runs to a generator and begins to dig into the ground beside it as his ship also arrives. The shield over the factory flickers out, and Thrawn then gives Padme her comm and the lightsaber. He reveals he has been on a mission for the Chiss Ascendancy the entire time, to find the factory's shield generator and steal it. Thrawn departs, saying his mission is complete and he will not help Padme rescue Anakin. Anakin, meanwhile, continues to evade the droid defenders as he senses several new presences arrive in the factory courtyard. Padme finds him and returns his lightsaber, also telling Anakin of Thrawn's departure with the shield generator. Anakin then moves on, attacking several of the B-2 droids with the new armor. He slashes one across the chest, but is shocked when his lightsaber fizzles out entirely. Anakin falls back, deflecting blaster shots and coming to terms with the strange new material. Padme provides covering fire from above, and to their surprise, Thrawn also arrives to help clean things up. Lebjow appears as well, telling Padme the factory workers have been evacuated. Thrawn then reveals the mysterious anti-lightsaber material is called cortosis, a rare substance that can also resist blaster bolts. If the factory is able to mass-produce the cortosis droids, it would be a significant advantage in the war against the Jedi and clone troopers. Anakin pushes to destroy the factory, while Thrawn suggests reprogramming the droids to be set up for failure. Anakin sets R2 towards carrying out Thrawn's strategy, and they then set out to search the rest of the factory. Duke Solha then appears and confronts Padme, who had stayed behind to guard R2. Anakin and Thrawn find a wing making cortosis clone trooper armor. It seems Solha is working with Dooku to plan a mass infiltration of the Republic Grand Army, a ploy that would be perfect for attacking the Jedi Temple and Chancellor Palpatine. Anakin suddenly senses Padme is in danger as she continues to talk with Solha to stall him. Solha moves towards R2, and Padme fires a bolt at him. However, the Count is wearing cortosis armor as well, and it has no effect on him. R2 finishes his sabotage in the nick of time, and Padme attacks Solha again. After a brief scuffle, she manages to knock him out, but a B-2 battle droid then awakens. Elsewhere, Thrawn directs Anakin to fill clone trooper helmets with cortosis. Padme and R2 then rush inside, warning them of incoming droids. Anakin then dons a suit of cortosis armor and confronts the B-2. With the help of R2-D2, he destroys it by stabbing it in the right eye with his lightsaber. More droids arrive, however, opening fire. Anakin then uses the Force to lift 9 cortosis-filled helmets in the air above the droids. He dumps the cortosis on them as Thrawn fires an electric blast from a special gun. The energy floods into the cortosis and overloads the droids, incapacitating several of the special B-2s. Anakin is freed up to take out the normal droids, then moves to destroy the factory. Padme and Thrawn rush to find their freighter to escape as Anakin cuts down a massive pillar supporting the ceiling. He makes it back to Padme and Thrawn, who have found a ship to evacuate the factory workers. Lebjow rushes up with R2, and Anakin remains determined to destroy the mine. Thrawn and Padme caution him against risking further ire of the locals, but Anakin stubbornly refuses to let the Separatists retain access to the cortosis. The miners, Padme and Thrawn become resigned to the notion that they cannot change Anakin's mind. Thrawn, who has deduced Anakin and Padme's relationship, asks Padme to appeal to him one last time. He departs, declining Anakin's offer to open diplomatic relations between the Republic and Chiss Ascendancy. Lebjow asks to accompany Padme and Anakin back to Batuu, where he has now effectively become shunned by his people. Everyone takes to the air, and Anakin detonates several explosives in the mine tunnels. However, the eruption is much more violent than expected, and the cortosis redirects the heat energy of the explosions. Lava erupts from the surface and floods the croplands of Mokij, reducing it to a wasteland. The planet is ruined, and Padme makes a promise that the Senate will send aid, though quietly she knows it is a fool's hope. Anakin proposes to a solemn Lebjaw that he try work as a bartender at the Black Spire Cantina on Batuu. Emperor Palpatine senses a disturbance in the Force. Before him stand his two greatest soldiers, the Chiss Grand Admiral Thrawn and Palpatine's Sith apprentice, Darth Vader. The room is tense, for Thrawn has recently suffered a surprise defeat and failed to capture a group of rebels on Atollon. While he is certainly not an enemy of Vader, the two are far from friends. In his time as Grand Admiral thus far, Thrawn has confided to Palpatine his concerns over the Death Star project, citing the gathering of many Imperial resources and ships into one star system to be a potential vulnerability. Instead, he has been pushing for a new TIE Defender project on Lothal. Vader, a supporter of the Death Star, is thus wary of Thrawn and watches for the point where the Chiss' misgivings step over into open resistance. However, Palpatine sees the recent disturbance in the Force he sensed to be an opportunity, both to test Thrawn's loyalty to the Empire and Vader's connection to his Jedi past. He surprises them by saying this new problem will require them to work together. Thrawn asks instead to pursue the Atollon rebels, but Palpatine instead assigns Tarkin to that task. Palpatine informs Thrawn and Vader the disturbance originates from the planet of Batuu near the Unknown Regions. The world is part of both their pasts, and Palpatine then dismisses them, a thin smile stretching across his face. Thrawn and Vader board the ISD Chimera, where Thrawn's Commodore Karen Farrow meets the Stormtrooper Commander Kimmond. Politics swirl around one of the Chimera's senior officers and Vader's Stormtrooper Commander of the notorious 501st. Farrow herself has been expecting a task force to be placed under her command for some weeks, and Commander Eli Vanto's disappearance from the 7th Fleet has yet to be explained. The Chimera suddenly drops out of hyperspace prematurely. Vader questions if the ISD's crew has made a navigational error, while Thrawn orders for scans to search for large masses or ships. He reveals he has been in the sector before during the Clone Wars. As the search continues, Vader approaches Thrawn and demands his Noghri bodyguard Rook stop infiltrating the 501st Darkhawk ship. Kimmond has had the unenviable task of evicting Rook each time he breaks in, and warns the Noghri that his men will shoot to kill if necessary. The hyperdrive of the Chimera fails again, the Star Destroyer still seemingly blocked from jumping to light speed. Thrawn decides they must try and find an alternate route. Farrow then suggests they travel to Mokij first to save time, and Thrawn agrees to the plan. Vader is quietly apprehensive, not wanting to revisit the planet. The Chimera nonetheless arrives at Mokij to find the planet of ruin, void of life. It is markedly different from the lush world Vader remembers, and Thrawn believes a cataclysmic event of sorts may have happened. He notes abnormalities with the planet's moons, wishing to investigate further. Only 6 of the believed 10 have been detected, and Thrawn believes it may be connected with the disturbance on Batuu. Vader, however, stops the investigation, demanding they push on to Batuu itself. After a lengthy journey, they at last arrive in sight of the planet. Thrawn suggests that to avoid any hostile parties being driven into hiding at the site of a Star Destroyer, he and Vader should travel down alone. Rook, Farrow, and Kimmond naturally all have misgivings over this plan, but Thrawn and Vader insist on carrying on. They fly alone down to the outpost Black Spire, which Thrawn notes has several new houses that weren't there before. Vader cannot sense the disturbance the Emperor had warned them about, itching to get the mission over with as soon as possible. At each of the houses, they discover parts of a large communications network, presumably to send signals across the unknown regions. Back in space, the Chimera detects several ships traveling down to the surface, an unusually high amount of activity for the remote sector of space. 4 small freighters head towards where Thrawn and Vader had landed, and then 2 larger ones appear soon after. Below, Thrawn and Vader reach Black Spire and head to its cantina, where Thrawn believes the bartender may recognize him. The outpost is largely inhabited by humans and several alien species. Vader takes particular note of the Darshi, who wield large knives and have fighting builds. They enter the cantina, Vader observing a group of Darshi to gauge their reactions. Thrawn speaks with the bartender, who does indeed recognize him. The bartender reveals the Darshi have established a settlement on Batu, and though they have not done anything wrong per se, something about them feels off. Vader approaches Thrawn from behind and warns them the group of Darshi is watching them closely and seems to be gearing up for a fight. Reports come in from Faro of the incoming ships. Thrawn decides to withhold the Chimera for the time being, but allows Vader to send his First Legion to attack the alien ships. The Darshi quietly move to surround Thrawn and Vader, then surge forwards to attack. Thrawn and Vader fight them off, only looking to subdue rather than deliver killing blows. As the fight dies down and the Darshi fall, Vader senses a dark, confusing surge in the Force. An explosion goes off in the distance, which Thrawn suggests comes from an attack on their freighter. Vader, however, uses the Force to pinpoint the disturbance emanating from the three houses of the communications network. A large swarm of insects then falls upon Thrawn and Vader, and when struck, they explode into a solidifying gray liquid. It becomes evident their attackers are trying to take them alive, and Vader's right arm becomes immobilized. However, his left is still free, and as several Darshi emerge from stealth, he slashes at them with his lightsaber, killing them all. At the same time, Commander Kimin flies towards the alien ships on Vader's Darkhawk, looking to capture prisoners for interrogation. Several of Thrawn's TIE defenders then swoop in to help, led by Captain Volt Scaris. They are part of Thrawn's pet project, equipped with shields and hyperdrives. Kimin is initially skeptical of their combat abilities, but the defenders quickly prove him wrong by being more agile than expected. The two forces work together for Kimin to board the alien ship, which puts up a fierce fight. The defenders are overcome, and Kimin leads the search for intel and survivors to question. However, the cargo of the freighter is destroyed. Back on the surface, Thrawn and Vader discover two of the houses had been destroyed, and that the disturbance in the Force seems to have disappeared for now. They receive a report from Kimin that a freighter that had been on the surface with them has escaped to hyperspace. Vader, though growing more appreciative of Thrawn's skills, tells the Grand Admiral he must still earn his trust. Thrawn begins investigating the mysterious house left standing, and in a large room they find 10 long cylinders with body couches inside. They decide to bring 2 on board the Chimera and question the bartender further. Thrawn gets back into contact with Captain Faro, and learns Kimin was able to capture 3 prisoners. Kimin also reveals that before the cargo was destroyed, he had briefly caught a glimpse of more cylinders, though much larger than the ones found by Vader and Thrawn. Vader and Thrawn then return to the bartender to find the Darshi bodies gone. Thrawn asks Vader to study one of the Darshi knives, which turns out to have intricate patterns engraved in its blade. He then shows the bartender a hollow of one of Kimin's prisoners. The bartender immediately recognizes the alien, but does not know what the cylinders are used for. He claims some of the Darshi served the aliens who had brought the cylinders and coffins to Black Spire. Thrawn tells Vader the aliens are called the Grisk, a nomad species hailing from the unknown regions. As they fly back to the Chimera, Vader deduces the Grisk had hired the Darshi to set up a base of sorts at Black Spire. The cylinders he believes to be some sort of hibernation tanks, used for secret transport of Grisks in the Black Spire. Their fear of discovery was the disturbance sensed by him and the Empire, for the beings inside the tanks were Force sensitive. The large cylinders are still an unknown, but the Grisk ship has also been brought on board the Chimera for examination. Thrawn meets with Scaris, who details his encounter with the Grisk ships. He and Kimin agree that other smaller ships seem to be transports, not vessels of war. Thrawn believes they must hunt down the Grisk who escaped, and rejects the theory they are not nomadic. He deems them a threat to the Empire, citing under his authority as Grand Admiral they will pursue and destroy the Grisks. Faro is given a set of coordinates to travel to, where Thrawn anticipates in little less than a day they will meet the Grisks in battle. The Chimera makes several small jumps, during which Thrawn confides to Vader he also expects to find the source of the Force disturbance. They find nothing, but analysis of the freighter debris comes in. Thrawn believes the destroyed Grisk cylinders were gravity well projectors, the reason the Chimera was pulled out of hyperspace and the hyperspace lanes are in chaos. He has further theories, but remains tight-lipped about them to Vader. The Chimera attempts several more probes in the space of interest, but comes up empty-handed each time. Vader becomes more frustrated with Thrawn, beginning to wonder if the Grand Admiral's success had been a flash in the pan. He openly accuses Thrawn of putting his loyalty to the Chiss Ascendancy above the Empire. Thrawn instead thanks him for questioning his loyalty rather than his social status or alien nature. The Chimera drops out of hyperspace one more time, with Thrawn readying the ion cannons and aiming them at a distant area. Vader sees a small explosion in the distance, and a large cylinder comes into form. It matches the ones found by Kimin. Thrawn tells Vader he believes it to be a gravity projector equipped with a cloaking device, one of several laid out on the hyperlane to disrupt space travel. The Grisk are undeniably blocking the route to Batuu for some unknown reason, perhaps to close this area of the unknown regions to the Empire. Thrawn states to Vader he still believes they must eliminate the Grisk, which pose a threat to both the Empire and the Chiss Ascendancy. He tells Vader of his mission in the past with the Jedi General Anakin Skywalker. Vader tenses up, wondering if Thrawn knows his true identity, but agrees to continue to accompany Thrawn. Thrawn then questions the prisoners further, and takes the Chimera on another hyperspace jump. When they drop out, two large frigates attack and move to board the Star Destroyer. Kimin and Vader defend the ship from the boarders, the Sith Lord cutting through the attackers with ease. They manage to storm into the enemy ship, and secure it before the Grisk can wipe their computers. Later, Thrawn observes some Grisk armor taken from the battle. He hopes by analyzing the history he can glean from it, they may be able to find the Grisk homeworld and secure the prisoners responsible for the Force disturbance. To Vader's ire, Thrawn seems to have a guess towards the nature of the prisoners, but reveals nothing else. All he says is that the Emperor has a strong interest in the unknown regions, and that the secret is connected to that. Vader demands intel, and Thrawn then agrees to tell him at least part of the story. At the same time, the Grisk prisoners are taken to the personnel quarters of the ship instead of the brig to keep the two groups of prisoners separate. However, as Kimin is patrolling, he discovers the Grisk have managed to escape and are looking to steal the Darkhawk. With the help of the frustratingly ever-present Rook, Kimin's men defeat the Grisk, killing all but 4. It is then revealed that Vader wanted the Grisk to escape in order to assess their fighting abilities, before crew members of the Chimera were killed. Nonetheless, Thrawn is able to learn more about the Grisk, including the fact that they replaced their teeth with moldings that contain useful pieces of tech. Additionally, he now deduces that the Grisk's interest in the Darkhawk, a relic of the Clone Wars, implies they hail from Mokij. It is the only place in the area where they could have learned about that type of technology. More specifically, Thrawn said, the Separatist factory on Mokij that we once assaulted. Vader straightened to his full height. That you once assaulted, he corrected. No one else aboard the Chimera was ever there. Of course, Thrawn said, inclining his head. I misspoke. The Chimera closes in on its destination, detecting Grisk ships in the distance. Vader is quietly surprised when Thrawn reveals the Grisk are moving the moons of Mokij into the hyperlane to disrupt travel there. The Chimera surges forwards to make battle, with Thrawn telling Vader and his commanders they must find out where the prisoners are being held as soon as possible. Thrawn tasks Faro with handling the main assault, and asks Vader and his stormtroopers to help him land on the surface. Vader instead orders Thrawn to stay on the Chimera, stating he will handle the ground assault himself. Vader makes landfall and immediately storms the weapons factory, old memories from his Jedi past resurfacing. He can tell the fearful prisoners are Force-sensitive Chiss, and wonders if they are affiliated with the Jedi or Sith at all. The presences of the prisoners begin to fade, signifying the Grisk are putting them back in the hibernation chambers. Vader and Kimin overrun the Grisk defenders and begin searching for the prisoners. They find 5 young Chiss children, all girls, and move to evacuate them. Above, Thrawn and Faro send out the TIE defenders to take out the Grisk tug ships surrounding the moon. They rendezvous with Vader as the prisoners are transferred to the Chimera. Vader confronts Thrawn and demands the full truth. Thrawn reveals the Chiss center around one of the most closely guarded secrets of the Chiss Ascendancy. The Force-sensitive children, exceedingly rare in Chiss society, are used to help navigate through the unknown regions. Chiss ships are not equipped with nav computers, and must rely on the children, mainly girls, to guide them using their third sight. The Force sensitivity also fades with time, diminishing greatly into adulthood. Thrawn then states they must find the main Grisk base to rescue the rest of the children. revealing the Emperor also wishes for the Empire to expand into the unknown regions. Vader agrees, telling Thrawn if the attack fails, his forces will withdraw and return to Coruscant. Thrawn then asks Vader to perform the same task as the Chiss children, to guide them to the Grysk base using his force powers before the Grysk themselves can arrive. Vader takes his seat at the helm, and with a touch of irony learns the Chiss word for their navigators roughly translates to Skywalker. Vader emerges from his meditation to find they have successfully arrived at the Grysk base. The Chimera and Darkhawk are readied for battle, and Kimin and Rook lead a boarding party onto the Grysk ship where the remaining Chiss children are being held. Thrawn sends out the TIE Defenders in a series of probing attacks, hoping to bait the Grysk into a false sense of security. Kimin and Rook recover 2 Chiss girls and begin to fight their way back out of the ship. News of the prisoners' retrieval reaches Vader and Thrawn, who is in one of the TIE Defenders. With the children off board, Thrawn allows Vader to launch a full attack on the Grysk ships. Vader is briefly surprised at the capabilities of the TIE Defender's speed and agility, and the Grysk soon prove to be no match for the Imperial firepower. Thrawn hails the commander of the Grysk and demands they surrender or risk outright destruction. The message comes through loud and clear, and the Grysk withdraw back into hyperspace. After the battle, Admiral Aralani of the Chiss Ascendancy visits the Chimera and takes the kidnapped children back to their families. Thrawn meets with Vader in his office, where he offers evidence that the Grysk do indeed pose a threat to the Empire. He shows Vader one of the Grysk gravity projectors, which turns out to have an inner meshwork made of cortosis. It implies a deep knowledge of the Empire, and that the Grysk have been studying them for a long time. Only Vader, however, knows that in secret Palpatine had commissioned the cortosis armor as assurances for the success of Order 66. Thrawn worries the Grysk may be preparing for a decisive incursion into Imperial space, evidenced by their sealing off of the space around Batuu. Again he probes Vader, suggesting he knows his true identity of Anakin Skywalker. Vader denies the allegation, and realizes that by suggesting the use of Imperial resources against the Grysk, Thrawn will be killing 2 birds with 1 stone. It will fulfill his loyalty to Palpatine and the Empire, while protecting the Chiss Ascendancy as well. Vader then tells Thrawn that a Grysk ship that escaped the battle had Chiss designs, and that several warriors had been spotted wearing Chiss cloaking devices. Thrawn then admits there is a faction within the Chiss who are working with the Grysk. His ultimatum was thus a message for both groups, and he reveals the schism had stemmed all the way back to when he first joined the Empire. Nonetheless, Thrawn vows to Vader he will eliminate all threats to the Empire before returning to his people. He and Vader agree to never speak of Anakin again, and the Sith Lord offers some last advice on the design of TIE Defenders. Their business settled, the 2 greatest servants of the Empire prepare to return to Coruscant. An Imperial Star Destroyer hovers over a blue-green planet before jumping to hyperspace. Unknown to the crew, they are being tracked by the Chiss warship Steadfast, which is maintaining a cover of stealth. It is commanded by Admiral Aralani, and it seems the Star Destroyer is deep in alien territory and has inadvertently interfered with the Steadfast mission. Aralani's crew is able to track the destroyer's vector, and she sends the data to the young female Chiss who serves as their helm. As the Steadfast jumps to hyperspace, Aralani also calls in all her senior officers for a meeting, among them Lieutenant Eli Vanto. Meanwhile, on board the Chimera, Grand Admiral Thrawn and Commodore Karen Farrow meet with Grand Moff Tarkin. They learn Thrawn's TIE Defender program is at risk, for Orson Krennic has managed to divert funding to his own Stardust project. Thrawn is miffed, for he has believed this project to have the personal backing of the Emperor. Centered on Lothal, the manufacturing of TIE Defenders has resulted in a growing fleet of the fastest, deadliest starfighters in the galaxy. Thrawn deems the Stardust project, the construction of the Death Star, a waste of Imperial resources and time that will cost it in the long run. He decides to depart immediately for Coruscant to plead his case with Emperor Palpatine. Farrow then gives Thrawn a datapad of communications from rebels, specifically the Resistance group on Lothal. Thrawn and his forces have recently thwarted a raid by Hera Syndulla on the TIE Defender assembly lines, capturing her and presently planning to crush the rest of the Resistance. Farrow, however, cannot discern anything from her analysis of the rebel comms. Her thoughts turn to Eli Vanto, Thrawn's former right-hand man who had mysteriously vanished years ago. Thrawn believes the rebels, led by the former Jedi Kanan Jarrus and the aspiring Jedi Ezra Bridger, will soon attempt to rescue Syndulla from her captivity under Governor Arinda Pryce. Faro, who has noted that Pryce has become overly emotionally invested in the conflict, believes she cannot be trusted to stabilize the situation if Thrawn departs for Coruscant. Thrawn, however, deems Director Krennic's project to be the larger threat to the TIE Defender program and future of the Empire. Then, new orders come in from Tarkin, redirecting the Chimera to a new set of coordinates to meet with him on the Fire Drake in the Sev Talk system. Director Krennic will also be present. And on board the Fire Drake, its commander Grand Admiral Savitt plays host to Director Krennic and Grand Moff Tarkin. Tarkin approaches Savitt and asks him to quietly help Thrawn in the eventual showdown between the Chiss and Krennic. The time of the meeting approaches, with some of the major power players of the Empire all coming to one table. Additionally, Emperor Palpatine himself appears via holo. Tarkin informs them that Project Stardust has encountered an obstacle, one seemingly unable to be solved by Krennic. The director admits they are having issues with Growlocks at the equipment transfer point, which have pushed the project 3 weeks behind schedule. Tarkin asks Thrawn to deal with the problem, but the Chiss is hesitant to leave unfinished business behind on Lothal. Tarkin then turns to Palpatine and asks that if Thrawn can destroy the Growlocks within a week, funding will be restored to the TIE Defender program. The Emperor agrees and ends his signal. A miffed Krennic insists on sending a representative of his on board the Chimera to monitor Thrawn's progress. He decides to employ Briarly Ronan, who is instructed to delay Thrawn so that Krennic can be rid of the Growlocks, but only after Thrawn's week has passed. Later, Savitt meets Thrawn privately and informs him he is being used as a tool by Tarkin to take down Krennic. Thrawn also meets Ronan, and returns with him to the Chimera. The game of politics begins, with the Chimera heading first to a nearby transfer system, a large hub of activity for ships of all sizes. There, Thrawn sees a Growlock for the first time, a larger relative of Minox. Hundreds of them are swarming the station, attaching to power cables or shield sensors. Thrawn decides they must capture one to study it, and finds they are able to evade ion cannon bursts. A nearby freighter jumps to hyperspeed, but is unaware of several Growlocks attached to it that will wreak havoc on its systems. Turbo laser cannons are deemed an unviable option as well, and Thrawn then calls upon Captain Benji Dobbs, newly appointed commander of the TIE Defender Squadron. However, Dobbs also has no success. Thrawn paces away, with Ronan quietly fuming at what he sees as woeful inefficiency. However, Thrawn then launches a second TIE Defender to act as bait. On its wings, it deploys a high-voltage loop, one that attracts 3 Growlocks. Dobbs is able to shoot down a straggler and take it back to the Chimera. The progress is reported back to Admiral Savitt, who seems to be harboring personal schemes of his own. Savitt also tries to placate an antagonistic Governor Havland, who believes Thrawn to be incompetent. Meanwhile, Lieutenant Eli Vanto reflects on his year of service thus far under Admiral Aralani on the Steadfast. He had started in the analytics department, which fit his skill set well. His work became routine, however, and he is presently summoned to the bridge. There he sees Vanya, one of the ship's navigators. She is 22 years old, unusually old for a navigator but still skilled. Eli approaches Aralani in her command chair, where on a display he is shown what seems to be a freighter taking fire from an unknown source. Though not much is able to be deduced from the images, it seems the ship was pulled out of hyperspace prematurely. Back on the Chimera, the dead Growlock is dissected. Thrawn takes note of the creature's agility and speed, and is interested in their electrically charged natural propulsion systems. Additionally, their findings don't quite align with Havland's data, which failed to note the presence of Clauson-36 gas in the Growlock's propulsion systems. Ronan is skeptical, and as Faro is sent away with him to obtain a data card, he tries to tempt her with a potential promotion. He tries to convince her Thrawn has blocked a new assignment of command for her, but Faro doesn't buy it. Thrawn then takes the Chimera on a vector to track the freighter they saw jump to lightspeed. He has Faro analyze the freighter's cargo, and asks for an analysis of a gas leak they detected on it to see if it matches up with Clauson-36. They prepare for the jump, and battle stations are readied. Thrawn then reveals that by tracking vectors from the other freighters that have gone missing, he believes the ships to be actually stolen. The Chimera drops out of hyperspace to find a small mobile way station that has been scuttled and destroyed by an unknown party. There are no survivors inside, but Thrawn deduces that several beings on the station went missing. The hunt for the thief of the ships continues, with the scheme seeming to fall into place. Freighters arrive at the station the Chimera came from and transfer their cargo to a second freighter. That ship is sent to vanish into space under the guise of Gralloch attacks. Varro then admits they had not followed the exact vector of the freighter, but Thrawn takes her error in stride and they backtrack along the exact vector. It turns out the freighter Thrawn is tracking is the same ship encountered by Aralani and Eli. The Steadfast, cloaked in stealth, observes from a distance the arrival of the Chimera and its subsequent microjump. The Chimera then gets pulled out of hyperspace, which Varro fears may be due to Grisk intervention. Their scanners pick up ship debris as Thrawn begins to search for the gravity generator that pulled them out of their jump. Sure enough, the familiar interditer cylinder is found, and a Grisk warship suddenly appears and attacks. Thrawn orders his officers to continue searching for an observation or research post. The Steadfast also races to the site of the battle, linking up with the Chimera to battle the Grisk warship. The Grisk are soundly defeated, and Thrawn then invites Aralani over to the Chimera. Aralani is furious at Thrawn for interrupting the Steadfast's mysterious mission. She and Eli fly over, with Eli finally returning to the Chimera and his friend Thrawn. They are taken down to the Grisk observation post found by Thrawn's officers, which appears to be some sort of survey lab. 2 Grisk prisoners have been captured, but the other station workers have all been killed. Aralani questions the Grisk, with one of them claiming to be Lifeholder and Deathbringer, Seeker of Conquest. Then, a young Chiss girl is also found, bringing a cold fury over Aralani. Thrawn prevents her from lashing out, in this way also seeming to create the facade of a feud between the 2 Chiss admirals. As they depart the prisoners, Aralani orders for Navigator Vanya to be brought down to the post. Elsewhere, Director Krennic calls Grand Admiral Savitt and informs him of the battle near the transfer point. He demands Savitt find what Thrawn is up to, but the intel is spotty and unclear. Savitt manages to get a call through to Tarkin, in turn setting up a confrontation between the two. Tarkin tells them the TIE defenders were spotted in the skirmish, but it is unclear who Thrawn was fighting. The call ends, and then Savitt calls Captain Razdel of the Mist Hunter. It is revealed he has a spy in Tarkin's office, who Savitt now uses as a source of intel on Project Stardust. Savitt also hails the Harbinger and its Captain Gilad Palaeon. Meanwhile, Thrawn, Aralani, and Eli examine the bodies of the victims, including the young Chiss girl. She is laying prone, which Eli learns is the result of sensory overload. Thrawn says she must be put through a mental regimen and sensory deprivation to make a full recovery. As the young girl is revived, Thrawn quietly approaches Eli and picks his mind as to what happened on the base. He pulls over one of Aralani's officers and learns that they had been tracking Grisk incursions into this region of space. Thrawn then deduces there may be a hidden 3rd Grisk ship in the area, presumably to take the prisoners from the freighter to a different location. Thrawn and Eli return to the Chiss girl, who tells them her name is Uni. She reveals she has been a hostage of the Grisk for 2 years, and has navigated many of their ships. Uni may prove to be a valuable source of intel on Grisk space, but the 2 Grisk prisoners who are still alive will also now know she has survived. Thrawn and Aralani quickly come to the conclusion that the hidden Grisk ship may soon attack the post, to remove the threat of Uni and Vanya. However, Ronan then insists on coming down as well to the observation post, complicating matters significantly. He arrives and confronts Thrawn, defying the Grand Admiral's orders to remain on the Chimera. Ronan regards Eli as a traitor of the Empire, and accuses Thrawn of bringing in the Chiss Ascendancy to sabotage Project Stardust. The problem now comes as to how to get the 2 navigators back to the Chimera without drawing Grisk fire. Thrawn, Aralani, and Eli then devise a flush and trap setup where they will send out a shuttle with the 2 Grisk prisoners. They hope to draw the remaining cloaked ship out of stealth so it can lead them to a comm center and consequently the Grisk base. Thrawn seems concerned the Grisk may be planning to move against the Empire sooner than expected. The Chiss plan to use Ronan's shuttle to transport the Grisk prisoners out of the post, with a disgruntled Ronan observing. Eli stands by his side as his translator, and they watch as the shuttle heads out. Laser fire erupts from a nearby asteroid, with the Grisk ship still staying cloaked. It then manages to escape into hyperspace when the Chimera opens fire, but Thrawn, as it turns out, expected that outcome. The gravity well generator is found. and is discovered to have a more sophisticated hyperspace sensor system. Ronan, however, is outraged the Grysk were able to escape. Thrawn prepares to take him back to the Chimera, but Ronan refuses to go. Eli instead is sent, but Ronan again protests, calling Eli a deserter. Thrawn, exasperated, calls Ronan a fool to his face. He tells him the stolen freighter had been taking its cargo to a secret way station, but the Grysk in turn had caught on to the thefts by the unknown party and were now exploiting them for their own gain. The conspiracy poses a significant threat to Project Stardust if the Grysk turn their attention there. Ronan allows Eli to return to data analysis for the Chimera, but plans to inform Krennic of the developments as soon as he can. Later, Vanya is brought before Uni and attempts to telepathically probe her mind for intel. This is possible through the power of Second Sight, and in the meantime, Thrawn assures Aralani that he remains loyal to the Chiss Ascendancy. Additionally, he states that he will need Vanya to move to the Chimera if she is able to learn the path to the Grysk base. Thrawn warns a hesitant Aralani that if Chiss military activity erupts near the Chimera, it could risk his career. In the end, Vanya is able to learn of the Grysk base's location. She is reluctant to move to the Chimera, but agrees when Aralani assures her she will accompany her. Meanwhile, Eli continues to study shipping and cargo data provided by Ronan. He discovers many of the missing ships from the transfer station were carrying Bloss V extract, food for Wookiee slaves. Many machine parts were also taken, among which Ronan recognizes components for turbo laser batteries. It appears someone in the Asaga sector has had a hand in the thefts, as the stolen ships all came from 3 worlds there. Governor Haviland is the likely culprit, who Ronan now knows was able to trick Krennic into funneling many supply routes through her sector. Thrawn also believes Haviland deliberately allowed several freighters to be lost to Gralox to keep suspicion away from her. At the same time, Ronan learns of Vanya's force sensitivity when he spies her tripping an unsuspecting crew member with the force. To be rid of Ronan, Thrawn sends him to the Alloxor system to find evidence of the conspiracy there, with Eli to accompany him. They will be guarded by Thrawn's specialized death troopers as a security precaution. Savitt, in the meantime, learns of Haviland's corruption via a report from Ronan. Krennic presses him to use his fleet, currently bogged down in a conflict with pirates, to rectify the issue. Savitt deems the move counterproductive, but agrees to send several ships to the assembly lines in the Asaga sector. Thrawn prepares the Chimera for the next leg of its journey. He convinces Admiral Aralani to let Faro remain on the bridge with Vanya, who will navigate them to the Grysk base using her powers. The Star Destroyer jumps to hyperspace, and along the way Thrawn briefs Aralani on their mission thus far. The complicated web of thieves stealing turbo laser batteries only to be interrupted by the Grysk worries both Chiss, but the Grysk may be planning another stage of conquest. This would undoubtedly threaten the Empire, and only contribute to the growing unrest in its dominion. Thrawn has also come to believe their 2 Grysk prisoners are not simple soldiers, but high-ranking military officials. He plans to arrive at the base having deliberately let the earlier supply ship escape with a warning, hoping the Grysk will mobilize a powerful force in response. It sets the stage for a large conflict with the alien invaders, but the previous skirmishes have not been reported to Imperial High Command. It is a dangerous gambit from Thrawn that pits him against the Grysk without potential Imperial reinforcements. Meanwhile, Eli and Ronan arrive at the desert planet of Alloxor, accompanied by 2 death troopers named Pick and Waffle. Donning civilian disguises, they venture into a spaceport town, a seedy area where they are immediately attacked by would-be thieves. Pick and Waffle easily dispatch them, and learn from some onlookers that Grand Admiral Savitt is involved in the sector. A man named Skulk and a woman named Sisay agree to talk with them more, and Eli poses as the heir of the Night Swan's criminal enterprise. He pretends the Night Swan had had an unfavorable deal with the Hutts, who also wished to do business with Savitt. Skulk and Sisay then agree to take them to a transport ship. Elsewhere, the Chimera drops out of hyperspace, its battle stations readied. A pair of conjoined Grysk ships is spotted in the distance, which Thrawn deduces may be a trap. He and Faro believe there is another cloaked ship in hiding nearby, and Thrawn readies his TIE squadrons. He gives orders for the tractor beams to be readied in a slingshot maneuver. The TIE fighters are effectively flung towards the conjoined Grysk ships, and Thrawn reveals he hopes to pinpoint the location of the Grysk communications triad. They know the triad requires 3 large poles to set up its transceiver that must be spread out across a large distance. Admiral Aralani believes the poles may be stationed on the nearby planetary moons. The TIE fighters have been sent out to gain more intel and, if possible, bait the hidden Grist ship out into conflict. Back in the spaceport, Eli's group is led by a cautious Sisay to a contact who can help them get on a transport ship to Savit. They are introduced to a slicer named Mole, who is tasked with forging Imperial credentials for them. An increasingly suspicious Sisay then leads them away and confronts them at blaster point, having seen through their cover as Hutt soldiers. She reveals a Star Destroyer has been recently spotted over the planet, and believes Eli and the others are actually working for Savit. Mole suddenly attacks, taking out Skulk and several other thugs before killing Sisay with a blaster. He is revealed to be Deja, an agent from the ISB sent by Colonel Wolf Yularen to help Thrawn. And on the Chimera, Thrawn quietly remarks how there is no existing Grisk art for him to study. The navigator Vanya visits him. Having gleaned from Uni's memories, the Grisk client species they have encountered is called the Scratchlings. The first TIE fighters reach the Grist ships, and Thrawn and Faro also take note of how the ships are rotating. By following its trajectory, Thrawn hopes to pinpoint the location of the hidden ship. He also deduces 2 of the Triad poles are tethered to the outside of the conjoined ships, with the third on the cloaked ship. The Chimera is brought out of stealth into full battle readiness, and Thrawn then issues an ultimatum to the Grist calling for them to stand down. Not expecting an answer to come anytime soon, he sends out a boarding party of stormtroopers to act as more bait to draw the Grisk out. Faro, hesitant to sacrifice a platoon of men for the sake of provoking the Grisk, volunteers instead to fly out herself as well. Their shuttle approaches the conjoined ships, which begin to rotate faster. Behind them, the Chimera suddenly opens fire above and below the ships. The cloaked Grisk warship becomes exposed as the TIE squadrons finally spring into action. Faro leads the shuttle on, for their mission is now to find any prisoners left on the conjoined ships and rescue them. The Imperials board and find 8 humans and several aliens. After avoiding Grisk booby traps, the prisoners are taken back to the Chimera. A man named Bleary is questioned, and is put under charges of piracy and theft of Imperial property. He seems to fear the Scratchling client species of the Grisk, and tells Thrawn of 2 Dashade aliens called Malice and Soroth who oversaw the prisoners. Their gang of thieves have been captured by the Grisk, and no concrete evidence can be traced back to Governor Havland. Thrawn moves on from the prisoners, now confident the defeated Grisk warship will have sent a warning to its main command center. He plans to find it next and utterly destroy it. Thrawn then boards the conjoined ships to investigate for himself, and the Chimera soon detects a gas anomaly in the distance. Faro and Aralani fear it may be incoming Grist ships, and send a warning message to Thrawn. Warning shots are fired, and seem to strike not ships but cylindrical objects. Thrawn deduces they are self-destructive devices sent by the Grist to destroy the base, and it turns out they only have a few hours to figure out how to stop the rest of the incoming bombs. Elsewhere, Deja guides Eli and Ronan through the spaceport and shows them the freighter Brylan Ross. They investigate the ship, and soon enough find stolen Imperial cargo pertaining to Project Stardust. The ship holds tanks of Clauson-36 gas, confirming Eli and Thrawn's suspicions to the ire of Ronan. He slips out and attempts to fly the shuttle away while Eli leaves to make a call. Deja catches on and makes it to the cockpit, confident Ronan won't get far. The shuttle is immediately caught in the tractor beam of the Star Destroyer above. Ronan asserts his authority to the Star Destroyer, and news soon reaches Grand Admiral Savit and Governor Havland. Only Savit knows why Ronan is in the remote sector, and learns the Assistant Director has asked to see him personally rather than Havland. Intrigued by the whole situation, Savit decides to meet with Ronan in the Sev Talk system. At the same time, an irritated Eli and the Death Troopers are now stranded in the spaceport. Eli contacts the Steadfast in hopes of reaching Thrawn, but learns he and Aralani have left to chase the Grisk on the Chimera. Eli is eventually able to reboard the Steadfast, and learns the young navigator Uni is the only person who knows where the Grisk base is. He asks her to guide the Steadfast there, and she agrees, trusting Eli. The ship immediately departs to find the Chimera, which in the meantime has prepared a defense against the fast-approaching Grisk bombs. The Steadfast arrives to the immense relief of Aralani and is ordered to stand by. The Chimera discharges its waste around the conjoined ships to create a shell of debris around them. The debris is irradiated, which allows for sensors to detect 8 bombs as they pass through the field. Thrawn puts his plan into action, first destroying the umbilicals connecting the ships. He triggers several gas explosions that push the ships apart, and the bombs miss the ships. The Gris try to reorient them, but their ships are too far away, and the bombs harmlessly explode. Thrawn then contacts Grand Admiral Savitt, who wishes to be briefed on Ronan's mission to Alexor. Savitt is apprised of the conspiracy surrounding Project Stardust, and informs Thrawn they will rendezvous to transfer Ronan. Thrawn sends him coordinates to an isolated system, and Savitt orders for his ships to suspend their campaign against the pirates. 4 of his Star Destroyers then set out to meet with Thrawn, who claims there will be a threat to the Empire there. The Fire Drake arrives, and Thrawn then hails Savitt. Savitt plans to personally take Ronan back, and it is revealed that the Grand Admiral had planned to kill Ronan and Deja to conceal his activities on Alexor. However, Thrawn asks to come to the Fire Drake's bridge, complicating matters. Thrawn confronts Savitt there, accusing him of stealing cargo from Project Stardust. A mountain of evidence against Savitt is brought forth, and he knows then he has been outmaneuvered. Savitt reveals that he deems Stardust to be a project destined for failure, and a ludicrous waste of money and resources. The supplies he has sequestered are being repurposed to the Imperial Navy. Ronan is incredulous, and Thrawn then brings the Grisk incursion to Savitt's attention. He asserts that with Savitt's ships now in the sector, they can easily end the Grisk threat. Savitt, however, remains defiant, but then Faro on the Chimera flies into view and demands his surrender. Faro sends evidence implicating Savitt to the rest of the Third Fleet as a tense standoff develops. Eli waits on board the Steadfast, which then detects an incoming Grisk ship. They must hope Thrawn emerges on top in his conflict in time to return and help them. Vanya asks Eli if the worst comes to pass, that he kill her and Uni out of mercy. It will be a capital crime if Eli kills the navigators, but he accepts the burden. Meanwhile, Savitt manages to retain the loyalty of the ISD Mist Hunter. Faro watches from the Chimera's bridge, noting how everything has passed according to Thrawn's predictions on the datapad before her. The battle between the Star Destroyers unfolds, but all of Savitt's attacks fall short. Thrawn, still on the Fire Drake, observes the other Grand Admiral's growing frustration as Faro maneuvers her ties to counter the ion volleys sent by the Fire Drake and Mist Hunter. Elsewhere, the Steadfast engages 2 Grisk warships that emerge from hyperspace. Another battle thus breaks out, with Aralani and Eli dancing with the Grisk while waiting for Thrawn to return. Thrawn, Faro, and his allies eventually emerge on top. All of Savitt's predictable assaults fail, with an uneasy Ronan beginning to side with Thrawn, viewing Savitt now as an undeniable traitor to the Empire. The other Star Destroyers under Savitt's command then mutiny against him, and refuse to continue the attack against the Chimera. Captain Gilad Palaeon of the Harbinger submits to the authority of Faro and asks for the other commanders to also stand down. A furious Savitt draws a blaster and fires at Thrawn, aiming to kill. But Ronan at the last moment flings his cape at Savitt, causing him to miss. Deja appears and stuns him. Using a regulations loophole where only blasters set to stun are allowed on an Imperial ship's bridge, Thrawn removes Savitt from authority. He immediately departs, knowing the Chimera must return to help the Steadfast. In the other battle, the Grisk warships are overwhelmed by Eli and Aralani's precise surgical tactics. The enemy ships are disabled, but the Grisk set them to self-destruct to avoid their technology falling into Imperial hands. Aralani learns Eli was asked to kill the navigators if necessary, and he reveals he would have taken him and the girls on an escape pod rigged to explode when taken into the Grisk warship. Aralani then reveals the data he has been analyzing for her the entire time has been a project of great importance. Eli has been searching all along for a pattern to predict when and where future navigators for the Chiss will be born. She then promotes him to the rank of Lieutenant Commander. The Chimera arrives at the scene, and Aralani delivers several pieces of Grisk art to Thrawn. She praises Eli's service under her, and Ronan is brought to the bridge. He is told the Grisk threat to the Empire has ended, and the time has come for his final report to be given to Director Krennic and Grand Moff Tarkin. Both officials then appear via hologram and ask for Ronan's account. He claims Thrawn failed to end the Growlithe problem, but downplays the military incursions with aliens in the area. It cedes a political advantage to Krennic, and Project Stardust carries on at the expense of Thrawn's TIE defenders. Thrawn advises Krennic that Darth Vader be given authority to watch over the project to protect it from internal and external threats, a measure Tarkin agrees to as well. He informs Tarkin he plans to immediately return to Lothal, and is told Gilad Palaeon and the Harbinger will accompany him. The transmission ends, and Thrawn then turns to Ronan and offers him a choice. It is revealed that Ronan despises the Emperor, a feeling he can hide from Krennic, but certainly not Darth Vader if he is to return to Stardust. Thrawn then offers him the choice to serve the Chiss Ascendancy in fighting the Grists, or risk being hunted down in the Empire. Ronan reluctantly agrees, but resolves in secret to work to find evidence complicating Thrawn as a traitor. For he has not forgotten Vanya's Force sensitivity, and now believes Thrawn may be conspiring to create an order of Chiss Jedi to subvert the Empire. Aralani disagrees with the decision to allow Ronan under her command, and warns Thrawn that war may soon erupt back in the Ascendancy. Thrawn informs Faro he had recommended her to be considered for command over the 11th Fleet, citing her performance in the battle against Savit. Later, he meets with Emperor Palpatine via Holo, and informs him of Savit's treachery. The Emperor questions his lingering loyalty to the Chiss and the severity of the Grist threat, and Thrawn reassures Palpatine his loyalty remains to the Empire. Palpatine tells Thrawn to then handle the rebels on Lothal and the young Jedi Ezra Bridger, with orders to return to Coruscant when the fighting is over.